All right, so welcome to the Latinos for Tennessee webinar series, where every few weeks we address one of America's hot button issues with experts and insightful activists. Today's session is sponsored by Restore 7, and we'd like to thank the media outlets tuning in to cover our webinar. I'm Nilsa Alvarez, political strategist and guest moderator. I'm honored to be your host this afternoon. Today, it's all about critical race theory. What is it? And is critical race theory truly a threat to healing the divide in our nation? We hear about it on the news and in our feeds as governors and legislators strike it out of the public school curriculum. We see it become the scandal of company employee trainings. And watch its supporters claim that to refuse the critical race theory curriculum would be to deny the very existence of racism in America altogether. Is that really true? Today, you'll hear exactly what you've been searching for, the truth. Before presenting our powerhouse panel, I'd like to emphasize what everyone in this webinar absolutely agrees with. Number one, racism is real and continues to be an issue today. No one here denies that. Number two, we all agree that racism is a subject that needs to be addressed in society. No one here ignores it. And number three, what matters most is how this subject is being taught or addressed in order for all of us to influence and secure racial reconciliation rather than fueling a divide. So as we start, our panel is by far very diverse, very passionate, and 100% dedicated to making sure that love wins at the end of the day. So with that said, I want to introduce our first powerhouse panelist. We have Reverend C.L. Bryant, and he is based out of Louisiana. Now, he is not only a wonderful fire preaching man of God, but he was actually part of the organization that created the critical race theory curriculum. And when he saw what direction it was taking, he decided to walk away. Today, he's a senior fellow at FreedomWorks. And Reverend, if you can please share your story with us, what did you see? What is critical race theory and why did you walk away?
Thank you so much, Nilsa, for having me on with you. It's an absolute honor to be here to share with you. I am C.L. Bryant, Senior Fellow, FreedomWorks, Washington, D.C. And I am in Jensen Beach, Florida now instead of Louisiana. And I am a former president of the NAACP in Garland, Texas, back in the mid 80s. And I've been a lifelong member all of my life from the 60s. My parents were activists. Critical race theory is something that was formulated back in the 50s, actually, along with Black liberation theology. And it is a tool, it is a mechanism of fundamental change that actually came about years later when Barack Obama, the chosen liberal man of color, to become president of the United States. And the whole goal is to make certain that we in modern times, particularly our children, believe that the efforts of Dr. King, Cesar Chavez, Rosa Parks, the Brown Berets, they were all for nothing and that they failed. And unless we listen to the voices of modern day so-called civil rights leaders and activists, then we can't possibly achieve what Dr. King, Rosa Parks, Cesar Chavez, or even the Brown Berets were wanting to achieve. And so what are they doing? How are they doing it? Well, it's referred to a little bit earlier when we were off camera. They're changing definitions. And I want everyone to remember this. When you change the definitions, you change the destination. And the whole idea from back in the 60s to where we are now was, to change a destination. But the definitions for all of us, red, yellow, black, or white, were always the same. We believed gender was what it was. We believed education was what it should be. We knew what it was to have a core, a nuclear family as far as that's concerned. But the definitions, even marriage, the definitions of all of that has changed. And so what it has done is has weakened our society as far as its core values are concerned, whether you're Latino, whether you're Black, whether you're white. Americans embrace a certain core value, and people who come here embrace a certain core value. But when those definitions of what the values are uncertain, then you have an uncertain society. You have uncertain young people who are not identifying with the traditions of their parents, but the traditions of those who are now indoctrinating them. Critical race theory is a tool, it's a mechanism to make young white kids, young Black kids, young brown kids question whether or not either of them can be trusted based upon their heritage, based upon their participation in what they want you to believe to be a nation that is founded and based in racism. The 1619 Project, the farce that it is. You should understand the numbers that go there. Yeah, slavery has existed on the continent of the Americas for over 400 years. But the truth is, slavery only existed in the United States of America for 83 years. Once the United States became a nation in 1776, not 1619. Once we became a nation in 1776, that's when we were a country. Slavery only existed in the country for 83 years. In fact, the very founding documents demanded that slavery must not exist in a nation, especially when Dr. King came and gave his speech so many years later, 100 years later, that we should be judged, all of us, on the content of our character and not by the color of our skin. So this theory that is being pushed in our educational systems is one that will surely erode and destroy the very core values, the very foundation of who we are and what we have been, that has made all of us across the board on this panel successful in our own way in the greatest nation on the face of the planet, the greatest success story the world has ever known. Critical race theory is a tool that is there to try and bring the nation down by allowing us to become too emotionally attached to those things that we will be upset enough about to have discord among each other. That's the problem. That's the purpose.
Wow. If anyone had no idea what CRT was addressing, I think Reverend Bryant is hitting the nail. And Reverend, one of the rumors, or should I say, what is circulating concerning the content of critical race theory is a statement that goes and that says this, and then I want to ask you if this is true or not. It's a statement that says that systemic racism is alive and well in America today. Can you please answer if that statement that has been promoted by CRT, if that is true or false?
When we talk about systematic racism, and even though, I look pretty good, I'm 65 years old. I was born in 1956. In 1964 and 1965, my parents were activists in the voting rights movement and the civil rights movement. They were instrumental in our city as far as bringing that about. In fact, in 1959, they brought Dr. King to our home church, Galilee Baptist Church in Shreveport, Louisiana, at Williamson and Snow Street there. It's a historical marker there now where he spoke. There was systematic racism in this country at that time because I've written on the back of the bus because I had no choice other than to ride on the back of the bus because that was the system of the day. I've drank from colored water fountains because when you drank from the white ones, you could actually be punished for doing that because that was the system. you know, and as far as movie theaters and that type thing, I've sat in the segregated balconies, written on the back of buses and all that type of thing. But let me ask you this. Let me say this to you. Is there anything, any of us on this panel, red, yellow, black, white, whoever you might be, is there anything that you can name in America today that if you wanted to do it, that the color of your skin would actually stop you from doing it if you wanted to do it? No, there's nothing that you would want to achieve in America today, in 2021 America, that the color of your skin, not voting, not anything, would stop you from doing, because that system has been crushed. The systematic racism that made my grandfather get off of the sidewalk when a white man would walk down it, that's been crushed. And it's been crushed by the people who paid the price for it to be crushed and for us to have this conversation in an America that they could never imagine. And what makes me so vehement about those who talk about systematic racism is that they have no clue what systematic racism is. I've experienced systematic racism, and the valor that those who came before us had to spend in order for us to act the way we act today. Let me tell you what's systematically happening and who is actually conducting that. It's the Democrats themselves. They're systematically causing you to think in racial terms. Can't you see that? They're trying to make your children think in systematically racist terms. They're wanting your children to think because they're sitting next to a little white kid that somehow he's inherently evil, or the black kid that they're sitting next to is somehow inherently slow or stupid, or the brown kid that they're sitting next to is somehow coming here to try and take things from us. They're systematically instilling these things. Everything they have accused the right of doing, everything they have accused Christians of doing, Republicans of doing, they themselves are the harbingers of it. Can't you see that? They are launching systematic racism through critical race theory. You must stand up. You must understand this for the diabolical tribe that it is, and push back hard, because systematic racism in 2021 America is a farce. Don't buy into it. Go to your Walmart, go to your bank, go to your car dealership, go to your favorite supermarket. You know what you won't find when you go to any of those? Systematic racism. You won't have to get out of line so a white person can get their order in. You can shop at any store you want to as long as you want to. You can go anywhere you want. But do you know where you'll find systematic racism? When you come home and turn on your television sets. There it is. Systematic racism is everywhere. You're being programmed to mistrust your fellow citizens, and you're being programmed to mistrust the very thing that has caused us to be the greatest nation on the face of the planet, the greatest success story the world has ever known. Don't be stupid. Defend what has made us great. Defend what our foreparents bled, fought, died, and believed that one day their children would enjoy. Let's enjoy it.
Wonderful. If anyone is watching our webinar right now and you wanted to if you wanted to pinpoint where systemic racism truly is, Reverend Bryant just told you where it is. And you know what? You can turn it off. You can turn it on and you can turn it off. It's called your TV set, your radio, and your social media feeds. I want to see if Dr. Ming Wang is ready. If not, I will move on to our next panelist. I'm telling you, we have a powerhouse panel. We have Danny Vargas. He is the CEO of VARcom Solutions. Name a TV channel, just name any. He's already been on them. I'm just going to say it like that. Name any three-letter TV network. He's been on each one, representing and very well representing the Hispanic community. He was entrusted by the Bush administration, or I think it was about 13 years ago, to start the very first, or to start putting together what will be the first National American Latino Museum, which I am absolutely excited about, because if there's something that has been undertold are the large contributions that the Hispanic and Latino community have made to America. And I'm going to quote Danny before I introduce him, because when he testified last year before the Senate Rules Committee to address the need for this museum, he said the following: Latinos take a backseat to no one in the defense of liberty, after he detailed the battles and wars that Hispanics have come out and fought side by side for America's future. And he says, our community has made an impact in every aspect of society, from arts to science to business, sports, politics, and more. One of my personal heroes, Roberto Clemente, helped usher in the era of Latinos and baseball, despite facing discrimination because he was both Latino and Black. Linda Carter, television's Wonder Woman in the 1970s, changed the face of strong women on TV. Before Brown versus Board of Education, there was Mendez versus Westminster, which laid the groundwork for desegregation. Throughout history, we've been relying on Latinos to fight our wars and to run our businesses, to tend our fields and to mend our wounds, to teach our kids, patrol our streets, and to share the word of God. Contrary to what some might believe, Latinos are not a recent patch being sworn out of the tapestry of America. We are an essential foundational thread woven to the very fabric of America. We are a wonderfully complex community today. We are over 18% of the population, $2 trillion in purchasing power. We are Afro-Latinos, we are Asian Latinos, we're blonde-haired and blue-eyed, we are mulattos and mestizos, and Native Americans and everything in between. We are not a race, we're a culture. I love that emphasis right there. We are Republicans, Democrats, and independents. We have foundational shared values around family and faith and freedom and opportunity and optimism and pride and passion. And those are the qualities we need most in our country today. Danny, inspiring words. Can you please share with us? You said Roberto Clemente is your personal hero, ushering Latinos in baseball, and my how loves baseball. How do you envision, because we're Boricuas, so how do you envision the Hispanic community's role today in promoting racial reconciliation in America?
Well, I'll tell you, Nelson, thank you for that very gracious introduction. I don't have to give that speech anymore, because now you can give that speech. You did a wonderful job describing it. Listen, I think it's incredibly important. It's incredibly important not only for our community, but also for our country. You know, this effort to create this museum started back in 1994 when the Smithsonian itself created a task force to see how they were doing in terms of portraying Latino stories in their exhibits and collections and galleries and so forth. And that task force came back with a report, and the title they chose for their report was Willful Neglect, saying not only was the Smithsonian doing a poor job, it's as if they were doing it on purpose. And it's important because for us to know who we are and where we are as a country, we need to know where we came from so we can have a better sense of where we're going as well. And it's all of those 500 plus years of Latino contributions that are missing from our museums. They're not included in our history books. So we need to understand those contributions that help to build, shape, defend this country, so that all of us, Latinos and non-Latinos, can really understand the origin, the genesis, the creation, the fortifying of this nation for the benefit of everyone. The commission that I was appointed to study the feasibility of this museum, we did our research and we traveled all around the country getting input from citizens and so forth. And our commission came up with 3 basic findings. number one, that there was a clear and pressing need for the museum. Number two, it really should be part of the Smithsonian Institution. Number three, it really ought to be on the National Mall, which is our nation's backyard. And the title we chose for our report was to illuminate the American story for the benefit of all, everyone, Latinos, non-Latinos, Americans, and those visiting our country to get a better sense of who we are as a nation. And to your point, Nelson, when you described what I testified in Congress, it really is about making sure that we can honor those contributions, honor our ancestors, but also inspire our descendants, because we are 18+% of the population today, but every study says that by the year 2060 or before, Latinos will make up about 30% of the population. So if we hope to remain a strong, thriving, and vibrant nation, that segment of the population needs to feel acknowledged, engaged, and invested in our future. So we're in the process now of making sure that we can build a world-class museum that can honor those contributions and do so as part of the fabric of America, so that we can talk about how vitally important it is to make sure that that segment of the population contributes in a positive, uplifting, fundamental way, so that we can all benefit and we can all prosper. Yep.
And you know, when you talked about Roberto Clemente, I'm going to pronounce it right. I'm Boricua. Yep. It just reminds me that we, the Hispanic community, really make a unique bridge in addressing the subject of racism in America, because inherently we come mixed from our native culture back home, depending on the island or country you're from. For example, in Puerto Rico, we have the Taino Native Indian of the island, and we have the Spanish side. And if you look at my family, and if you look at our ancestry DNA, like we needed it, because the test, we didn't need it, we see that split. We see half of the Spaniard, because my great grandfather was a plantation owner in Puerto Rico. And my grandmother was actually one of the Indian girl maidservant daughters. That, because, you know, they had their trophy wife, Spanish trophy wife, and during the day, but at night they would get with the maidservants, which were the Indians and the Native Indians of Puerto Rico. And that's how my family came to be. And so when you see my sister, she and I are opposites. She looks like Pocahontas, and I say that in a compliment, because she's beautiful. She's tan, green eyes, and she has the Indian straight hair. And I have the fair skin, blue eyes from the Spanish side. But in our family, to address anyone because of the content or the color of their skin never really made sense to us, because we were a melting pot. So how do you think the Hispanic melting pot brings light to the conversation of racism?
You know, I'll go back to what you said earlier, but before I did do ancestry DNA, and it turns out I'm a genetic sancocho. I'm a genetic stew. I am 50% Iberian. I am African. I'm Native American. I'm Western European. But that's us. That's who we are, right? We are that mixture, that incredible blend of not just DNA, but also cultures and influences. And it's a microcosm of what our nation is as well, right? Our nation is e pluribus unum, out of many, one, right? We are a single, unified, hopeful, optimistic people that comes from many places. We represent every population on the planet in this one beautiful experiment that we call America. 330 million people that have come from everywhere on every corner of the planet to create this beacon of opportunity in the world. Our community as Hispanics, you know, I talk about the fact that we're not a race, we're a culture. And those fundamental shared basic values, I think, are exactly what our country needs today. It is about family and faith and freedom, yes, for sure, but it's also about optimism and pride and looking forward despite the challenges that we face. Despite the challenges that our families have faced in the past. Look, my mother grew up as a servant girl in Puerto Rico, never learned to read or write. And we ended up on welfare when my parents divorced when I was 2 years old. She faced incredible challenges and hardship, and I love her dearly for it. She's the strongest woman I have ever known, and she's the one that taught me that when they tell you to sit down and be quiet, that's when you need to stand your tallest and be your proudest, right? So it is those types of personality traits and gumption and grit and determination and optimism and passion that we bring to the table that can be a great example for the rest of the nation to see and follow. What we did for this museum, for example, Nilsa, as chairman of the effort over the last 4 years, we were able to bring together a unified coalition, left, right, center, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, every sort of aspect of our community under a shared common vision of being able to better tell the American story through the lens of our community that has contributed to the building of this country for half a millennium. So we demonstrated not only what could be done, but how to get it done. And I think that's an example that we'll continue to be able to provide for all Americans, saying hard work, determination, grit are the best ways to be able to overcome adversity that, yes, exists, but tomorrow can be a better day than today.
Awesome, Danny. Thank you so much for your input, for all you're doing with the National American Latino Museum. If there's anyone out there that wants to be part of that initiative, that wants to bless or donate towards that museum, where can they go? Where can they find you on social media?
Sure. So right now, the 501c3 that helped get the bill passed is still involved in the process. AmericanLatinoMuseum.org is the website. The Smithsonian is in the process now of pulling together a board of trustees that will work to sort of begin building the museum, finding the location, fundraising for the private sector dollars, because it's a public-private partnership. But for now, if they want to get involved and learn what's happening and contribute, AmericanLatinoMuseum.org, and they'll make sure that that we can be partners in making this incredible world-class museum happen.
AmericanLatinoMuseum.org, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. So for more information, you can go to AmericanLatinoMuseum.org. Thank you so much, Danny. And we're moving on to Dr. Ming Wang. Now, Dr. Wang, I have your book. And, you know, something that most people will not know, but it seems that your story also inspired the character of the Chinese student that appears in the movie God's Not Dead. Because the author chose to use someone to kind of reflect a bit of your story, which I thought was pretty amazing. So Dr. Ming Wang, you know, let me say, first of all, you're a graduate out of Harvard and MIT. You are a world-renowned eye surgeon and or physician, optical physician. You are, you know, you are a philanthropist. You're the co-founder of Common Ground Network. You published the Common Ground Bible Study, and we're going to ask you a little bit about that. And as a teenager, and this is what, you know, this is when everyone's going to have to hold back tears. This is amazing. As a teenager, Ming he fought valiantly in China's Cultural Revolution, during which millions of innocent youth were deported to remote areas to face a life sentence of hard labor and poverty. He came to America with only $50 and earned 2 doctorate degrees, one in laser physics and one in medicine, and graduated with the highest honors from Harvard Medical School and MIT. He has the Wang Foundation for Sight Restoration, which has helped patients from over 40 states in the US and 55 countries. In all sight restoration surgeries performed free of charge. Dr. Wang was named the Kiwanis Nashvilleian of the Year for his lifelong dedication to help blind orphans children from around the world. Dr. Wang, I know that there's practically a movie that should be done with everything that you've lived through. So regarding what you faced with the Chinese Communist Party or the communism back in your home country, is there any messaging that you find in America today that you may find alarming because it reminds you to rhetoric or propaganda that you used to hear growing up? Have you identified any messaging, and if so, what?
Thank you, Nelsa, for the wonderful invitation to be with you all today. Hello, Reverend Bryant and Justice Robby. I heard about you. Welcome to Nashville. Angela, Danny, and Nelsa, and Lupita, and Raul Lopez, my old friend and patient. Speaking of movie, I just want to show you a little card. I just got back from Vancouver, Canada, and I was there for 2 months for the shooting of the film Sight, based on my autobiography, From Darkness to Sight. And the message of the movie just finished shooting. It's been a 7-year process. We're in the last year of the 8-year process, which is post-production. And it's full-length feature film starring Greg Kinnear and many other, famous actors. And the message of the movie is there are 3 messages through my life story coming to America, appreciating freedom and liberty, fighting the dictatorship back in China. And there are 3 messages the movie cite. One is very relevant to today's. All of us are created equal. Human beings, we are equal. Racial discrimination is wrong. Second message of the movie, cite through my life experience that depicted in this movie, is that life often is not a straight line, and don't give up hope. And third message, which is relevant to all of us, particularly immigrants, especially minorities. America is 20% Latino Americans, 18% African Americans, and 6% Asian Americans. These 3 so-called minorities is already 44% of US population, which will become the majority for the first time in US history in about 10 years. So the third message is most relevant to us because we all have cultural roots. So how do we balance between remember where we are from, but don't be stuck by it, but at the same time, assimilate and embrace the Western culture, American culture. So how do we achieve this balance? And what this movie site shows that while it is indeed true, present is made possible by the past. We need to remember our cultural root. But at the same time, we need to be at peace with the past, come to term with it, and embrace the future. So those are the messages. The movie will come out early next year, and I think it will be a tremendous movie to speak about the voice of immigrant minorities and to emphasize that we all have common ground. Regarding your question, Elsa, I think to me, America is so unprecedentedly polarized. It's deadly. And the polarization is defined as an increased fixation on our differences rather than appreciating what we have in common. And you ask about what is the relevance of my experience in China during Cultural Revolution, fighting as a teenager to have a future. And sometimes, I've been devoted to the cause of helping people finding common ground to overcome the polarization for many years. We published the Common Ground Bible Study, and we are about to publish second book, The Common Ground Solution, the extraordinary benefit of being a unifier in a polarized world. And people say, why are you so motivated over the years to help all of us finding common ground, such as establish a Tennessee Immigrant Minority Business Group, which I founded 7 years ago, aggregating Latino, African-American, Asian businessmen and women to help each other. My motivation comes from experience of used to living in a dictatorship, an extreme form of polarization, which is dictatorship. So my message is, America, don't go there. I take care of people with vision problem. People appreciate sight the most are those used to be blind. People appreciate freedom the most are those used to not have freedom. I heard what Danny said earlier about your museum. That's wonderful what you're doing. And you said there's so many positive energy message we can broadcast. So what I like to see, can we challenge all of us, myself included, everyone say, before we criticize another person who looks different, who share different values, who are different from us, before we criticize, before we delve into the differences between us, can we challenge yourself to pause and ask yourself, before we look into our differences with that person, can we look at the similarities first? We have 99.7% DNA sequence similarities with chimpanzee as human being. We say we need to take care of chimpanzees, but we're not taking our own human race ourselves. We have nearly 100% identicalness of DNA sequence between all human beings. So before we criticize another person, before we put down another person, before we demonize the opposition, before we fixate on differences, can we pause? And this is my challenge to all of us today. ask ourselves, do I have something in common with him or her? And can I pause a moment and just appreciate that similarities first? And I truly believe COVID-19 has revealed an even bigger virus in all of us. And that's the virus of polarization, an increased fixation on differences rather than appreciate what we have in common. So the vaccine against that virus of polarization is the finding of common ground.
Wow. And doctor, in what specific areas of your work have you found the common ground network approach to be helpful in uniting people? Like, what what are you teaching? What principles are you diving into when it comes to the common ground curriculum?
Dr. Rice Brooks and I established a nonprofit organization called Common Ground Network. And the mission of the organization is to study the methodology. I think all of us want to find a common ground with fellow human beings, and the crust of the matter is how. We have established a common ground seeking steps, STEPS. S stands for seeking common ground, thinking about why you want to find a common ground. And T stands for trading places, speak in the language of listener. E stands for empathy. We advocate, instead of talking, we advocate the SALT principle, S-A-L-T. Before you talk, can we S, start a conversation, A, asking a question, L, listen, and then and only then, T, talk. And P is about partnership, and last S is put into action. You know who inspired us to formulate this common ground seeking steps, STEPS, is none other than Jesus Christ himself. Because Christ's life is the perfect embodiment of the common ground seeking steps. For example, can you imagine a better example, more powerful example of trading places than he actually becoming one of us to feel our pain, suffer what we suffer as human beings? So this methodology, we use this methodology to apply. As I said, we published Common Ground Bible Study already. It's a 4-week Sunday school study, aggregate all parts of scripture that has to do with common ground seeking. I think it's imperative for all of the Christians to know that God wants us to develop relationships from the common ground who are different from us. And also we're writing the general book for believers and non-believers alike, it's Common Ground Solutions. And so we apply these principles to various different organizations and different sphere of group of group of people, because every group has different common ground. Just give an example, a few examples. Tennessee Immigrant and Minority Business Group, a group that I co-founded 7 years ago. We have about 250 members of Latino Americans, African Americans, and Asian Americans, businessmen and women. So what is our common ground there is to help each other in business, because if immigrant minorities, we're not going to help each other, who will? We don't have the family relationship, long history, social connections as many of the native people here. So if we don't help each other as immigrant minorities, who will? So that's the common ground. And not only help each other, but as immigrant minorities contribute to America and to pay back, to help keep America strong. So that's the TMBG, Tennessee Immigrant Minority Business Group. That's our common ground there. And the second example is our Psi Foundation, where doctors from around the world with different language, different ethnicities. And our common ground is to donate services to help blind, orphan children from around the world. We have helped patients from over 40 states in America and 55 countries, with all sight restoration surgeries performed free of charge, as you mentioned. And third example is the 917 Society, which led by Ms. Joni Bryant. And that example, that common ground, the mission is to put the Constitution in the hands of all 8th graders in America. So the common ground there of 917 Society is our respect to the system, the Constitution in America, to understand that's the foundation of our freedom, liberty. And next example is an organization called Living Sand Ministry, and is to apply scripture Monday through Friday at workplace, not just in churches, Monday through Friday. So there, the common ground there of all the folks involved in Living Sand Ministry is how do we work together with people who don't believe or share different religion beliefs? How can we find common ground? And next example is the church. I've been part of it. It's a Bethel World Outreach, Pastor James and Pastor Rice Books. And their common ground is that we have like 70 nations represented in our church. Our common ground is, doesn't matter what country you're from, our common shared love for Christ. And final example is the American Bible Project, which with a goal to put the Bible back in schools through history department. So in that case, the common ground of American Bible Project, which I'm serving the founders president, is to recognize that it is so important for us to remember the foundation of our nation is this Christian belief that is so important for us to remember what inspired this great experiment, America. So these are examples of common ground. The point is, with different group of people, you can find different common grounds. But my main message is America today is so polarized because social media is taking advantage of us. They give us polarizing messages so that we emotionally reflex and attack another person. And the media certainly is a joint conspiracy with the social media trying to polarize us to increase that Nielsen rating. For media, it's about divide and conquer. So we need to recognize all these forces are polarizing, dividing us. So we need to recognize, I think, at the end of the day, we have the shared humanity on the spaceship Earth. We have no other choice but to find a way to work together. And COVID is an example. It doesn't matter, virus doesn't recognize. For example, we asked the question, why COVID? As a doctor, I'm very troubled. Why we did so badly as the world's greatest, strongest nation with the best healthcare. We did almost among the worst among industrialized countries in the COVID management. We have 4% of world population, but we have 25% of the death. Why? We need to ask our question, why we did so poorly as a country? And I think the number one reason for that is the polarization, the increased fixation on differences rather than appreciating what we have in common. COVID is not a political problem. COVID is a medical problem. There's nothing, the virus doesn't recognize blue and red. A virus, in fact, any human being. Polarizing common sense medical issue into a political one so that we all clouded and confused by what we should do rather than rely upon basic common sense medical fact is the fundamental reason why America has done so poorly in this COVID-19 crisis unexpectedly with the best healthcare system. So we need to recognize this is an alarm clock that wake us up, and that's turn around. That's before we criticize another person. Ask ourselves, do I have something in common with her and him first?
Awesome. Dr. Ming Wang, if anyone that is in the audience wants to follow what you're doing, where can they find you on social media or a website for your foundation?
It's probably easier, just www.drmingwang.com.
Repeat it one more time.
drmingwang.com. drmingwang.com.
Awesome. And I think we can all agree that we need to replace CRT with CGC, Common Ground Curriculum. I'm going to advocate for that. Excuse me. Let me write to my legislators right now. We're going to replace and we're going to put CGC. We're going to put the Constitution in the hands of 8th graders and the Bible back in school, just like Dr. Ming Wang suggests. Thank you, Doctor. And we are going to move on with another powerhouse panelist. We have Miss Tennessee 2020, Justice Enlow. She served wearing the crown to represent all Tennesseans. She started a movement called Justice for Women, where she helps unify women that are struggling with different health issues. And I'm going to ask her a little bit about that. But She knows that because she was representing all of Tennesseans, she had to remain neutral when it came to hot button topics. And she didn't want to, but here's the thing, ever since she's no longer wearing the weight of that crown and doesn't have to be neutral, she feels the need to speak up. But what amazes me is the first subject she wanted to speak up about was CRT. And I'm like, whoa, this is interesting. So Justice, thank you so much for being with us. I know that you are now engaged, so spoken for, and you also serve with your family's ministry, Pastor Johnny and Elizabeth Enlow with Restore 7, who's actually supporting this webinar today, and you're mobilizing ministry in response to social and political issues. So tell us, why critical race theory? Why is it that that's the first issue you'd like to speak up on?
Really, I think that all of these progressive ideologies kind of have a very similar functioning system that they operate from. And so for me, critical race theory is very similar to the tenets that radical feminism operates from. It's very similar to any of those political ideologies, and it all ultimately feeds into Marxism, which the ultimate goal is in socialism. So for me, critical race theory, anytime that I can talk about any of these areas or issues is something I'm really passionate about helping educate people on, just because I think we hear these phrases often and then nobody ever explains, what is this? What does it mean for me? How am I interacting with this? And what can I do to be vigilant to not participate in propagating these lies that are being shared through things like critical race theory and gender theory and queer theory and all these critical theories that develop from postmodernism.
And what is it that you believe, because I know you're involving ministries in addressing social issues. How do you believe the church should address the topic of critical race theory?
Yeah, I think being a pastor right now would be incredibly difficult, having to navigate this, because you want to validate racism that people have experienced, and you want to validate experiences that people have gone through. But it's also really vital that the church calls out critical race theory, because ultimately, if it is seen through, we're not going to exist anymore. The church is going to be forced underground, and that's really kind of where all of this ends us. But I think as a pastor, an important way to process this with your congregation is recognizing that there's really two different perspectives when we're talking about racial issues, in my opinion. One of those is dealing with the traditional definition of racism and using empirical data or using statistics and information that we can observe and record, so we can work in tangibles. But then there's also the important aspect of dealing with people's hearts and fears, which may or may not be in alignment with empirical data or reality, if you want to call it that. And so I think that it's possible to deal with both. I think it's possible to even within my own self, there are things that I deal with, feelings that I have that are irrational, that are not in alignment with reality. And I have to navigate those, and I have to figure out, okay, why am I feeling this way? Is this an issue inside of myself, or is this an issue in my environment? But then also, I have to reconcile those with reality. And I think that the greatest unkindness that a church could do right now is to validate to the point of accepting critical race theory, because I think that acceptance of critical race theory is ultimately the undoing of being able to even address racial issues in the first place, because really it creates such I can't think of the word right now. Basically, it takes racism and makes it such this idea up here that no one can grasp, that you can't actually deal with it. You can't actually deal with the issues that we need to deal with and address specific instances. It's not tangible.
And I know you have a movement, Justice for Women. Can you tell us a little bit about what started that, and how can movements like Justice for Women help heal the racial divide?
Yeah, so I started Justice for Women after a 10-year battle with endometriosis. And if you're not familiar with what that is, it's a disease that affects at least 1 in 10 women, and it's considered to be one of the most painful diseases in the world, associated with the reproductive system. And So it took me 10 years to get an answer as to the symptoms that I was experiencing, the debilitating pain. And really, ultimately, I had to diagnose myself and find a specialist who would validate the pain and the things that I had been through, because I'd seen other doctors who had just kind of blown me off. So I wanted to start an organization to help younger women spot signs of endometriosis in their life earlier, because doctors were not doing a good enough job helping catch that. But really, I'm also very passionate about political things, and I would love to go into politics in the future. And so for me, my organization is more than just about helping women with endometriosis, but it's also about helping women celebrate every aspect of who they are as a woman. And I believe conservative principles really validate a woman's nature and who she is, and give value to that more than the modern feminist movement. And so my tagline is redefining modern feminism, because I want women to recognize that there is value in their ability to reproduce. There's value in our femininity. There is value and strength in each of the things that makes us a woman. And those are important things that, unfortunately, I think that the feminist movement has tried to create women who are just like men in order to get us the validation that we're seeking as women. And we've got to recognize that, no, the validation is in us being women and being fully who we were created to be, and in our feminine strength, and allowing men to be men and who they were created to be in their masculine strength.
Wow. Well, that's Justice for Women. And I have a feeling we're going to see that name, a hashtag Justice for Women, more often, maybe into political office in a few years. Who knows? Whatever the Lord leads. Justice, thank you so much for being with us. Where can people go to find more information about your movement or your page or social media?
Yeah, the best thing is just to follow me. I'm primarily on Instagram, which is at Justice Hope Enlow. I also have a website, which is justiceenlow.com. And both of those have information about justice for women. And if you think you might have endometriosis, I have tons of resources. I also have political resources on there. So whichever interests you have, there's info on there, justiceenlow.com.
Awesome. And we move on to our final panelist. And I'm telling you, this powerhouse panel was really to have a conference. So we have Robby Starbuck. He is a wonderful film producer out of Hollywood, a Cuban American. So he's Hispanic, of Hispanic descent. He can tell you a little bit about his family background on the island of Cuba, and he sure appreciates the freedom of America. But not only does he appreciate it, but he's also running for Congress here in the state of Tennessee to represent us. I say us because I'm in Tennessee too. So Robby, thank you so much for being with us. I think you've been talking about a lot of the problems that critical race theory is becoming in America, and how it's being used also as a ploy in the political and government world. I think also to influence elections. So can you tell us a little bit about that, and why do you think CRT is a problem or a ploy?
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me to this. You know, you touched on something there. I can kind of fuse it all together. My family being from Cuba, it's important to recognize that critical race theory is not new. This isn't the first time that a political group has tried to divide people by race or creed. It's something that's inherently of value to any Marxist ideology. And so when the so-called revolution happened in Cuba, you know, they actually didn't message that they were communists. In fact, the opposite happened. Castro never admitted he was a communist when the revolution was going on. He actually distributed pamphlets that would talk about racial justice and, you know, people being treated equally and people having access to better education or more food and things along those lines. That was the messaging. And it, in fact, said explicitly, we are not a communist movement, we are humanist. And they actually pushed a lot of these same ideas about critical race theory, and that, you know, depending on the color of your skin, you were either more privileged or less privileged, or inherently deserved this or that. And you saw what that turned into. It was such a divisive ideology that it tore the island apart. And eventually, after they consolidated enough power, they used it as a way to usher in communism. And then Castro finally admitted he was, in fact, a Marxist. Similar thing to what we're seeing happen today. We actually hear very similar, words tossed around by the purveyors of this ideology. So when you look at critical race theory in America right now, in terms of the political aspect, there's something to be said for shared language, okay? As Americans, our generations, millennials and older, boomers, X, all of them, we all kind of have a shared language around racial stuff, around religion, around our country. And so when we lose that shared language, bad things happen. And so that's why when they usher in these cultural revolutions, they change language, because then the generations feel separated from each other. Very similar to what Dr. Wang said. He was saying, separation and dividing people, it leads to really dark places. And to bring people together, you can't change the language. You have to keep a shared language for the people to come together. And so one of the core tenets of critical race theory is to divide and change that language. That's why you see things like, instead of people being called Latino or Hispanic, they've now chosen to call them Latinx. And to give you an idea of just how far this has gone, they've polled Latino people 2 times on this. Pew Research, which is a major nonpartisan polling firm, and then Think Progress, which is a progressive polling firm. And both of them found that 98% and 99% of Latinos do not want to be called Latinx. Well, the critical race theory subscribing academic community decided anyways to use Latinx. So you have generations of Latino people who don't want to be called this now being referred to this in pretty much every university in America. And then the AP changed their style guide for journalists to also refer to Latino people as Latinx, despite the fact that over 98% of that Latino people do not want to be called this. So this is why they change language like this, because it creates separations and divides. The more divided we are, the less likely we are to unite on specific issues that can show us that we are more similar than we are different. And so that is the core, of the ideology with critical race theory. And they use this because then young people relate in university when they go to school. They relate to the words they hear. So there's something to be said for, and we talk about this a lot in the film world, how many exposures do you get? The mere exposure effect creates reality for a lot of people. So if you start as a very young child in school and you're exposed to certain words throughout your entire childhood in school, you're likely to identify those words with very positive feelings, positive things, if they were presented positively. On the reverse side of that, if you're presented with words and they're presented negatively, and then you're presented with those words as an adult, you're going to perceive them as negative. So the words that they're framing as positive in education right now are explicitly tied to the furthest left candidates who are running for office in America. And the words that they present as evil or bad in education right now are words that are generally tied to people who are on the right, who are Republican candidates. This is a problem. Our schools and every child in America is, they deserve a politically neutral education. They deserve so much more than what they're getting right now in education. We can do better. And so we need to do better.
Wow. Robby, in your speech at CPAC, you pointed out that key players in social media platforms are all former Democrat staffers and activists from Twitter to Instagram, and that there is an agenda to implement a social credit system similar to the one used by the Chinese Communist Party. Would a plan of that magnitude implement or usher in a new era of systemic racism? And if so, which group would be affected?
Absolutely. There's no question about this. They actually, certain banks already have a social credit system that they're working on building right now and have been deploying in a beta testing sort of mode. And this is something you see in China. Yes, you see the Communist Party there. They use it to decide, are you worthy of a loan or worthy of participating in society at all? And so you look at things like right now, a good example I could give people is that if you went to Washington, D.C. January 6th because you were upset about the election and you didn't go in the Capitol, you were just there because you wanted to hold a flag and say, I believe in integrity. I want to see some things change. And that's it. it could very quickly devolve into a government that says that just your very attendance that day and questioning the narrative that the media has decided is the narrative that is the truth, just for questioning that, you can no longer participate in society. That's where social credit systems lead, and we see it in China. I actually just watched a documentary on this a couple of days ago, and the negative effect that it's had on the lives of people who have been deemed socially unworthy of participating in society. So these social credit systems, they're definitely a concern, and the big tech companies have already built out algorithms and systems to be able to track what you read, what you listen to, who you talk to, who you follow, what you believe. And it would be so incredibly easy for them to use everything they know about you to build a profile of whether you are worthy of participating in society or not. So the people that it will hurt the most, though, are the people who are at the largest disadvantage. And in many ways, you could make a good argument that it would be minorities and people who are on the right politically who would suffer the most from a social credit system.
Wow. So Robby, you are running for Congress.
Yep.
So as you make your run to hopefully be representing your district, so what initiatives do you envision yourself doing in response to the racial divide once you enter office?
That's a great question. So first of all, I would like to note that this is a very, 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 very important issue to voters. Okay, we just had a special election in Texas, and there was not just a congressional special election, there was also a school board election, which too many people overlook school boards. They're so critically important. You can look at red counties all over the country who have, very progressive left-wing school boards because nobody ran representing the ideology of the parents and the children who go there, and the Christian values a lot of those parents have. Well, in Texas, we just saw that change. 2 candidates ran who were explicitly running against critical race theory for the 2 seats that were open, okay? This is a district that Biden actually carried in Dallas. And so Biden won this district in the last election. Those 2 Republican candidates who ran against critical race theory won by 68% and 69% of the vote. That is what they ran against, was eliminating critical race theory. In the special election for the congressional seat there, the Democratic candidates only got 38% of the vote in total. So there are only 2 Republican candidates for the final runoff in that race, because they perform so poorly due to critical race theory. This is an election issue for people. So this is something very important to me, because my own children have experienced it. My own children were sort of guinea pigs in California, and we had to pull them from their schools because of critical race theory. So my proposal to end this is that, number one, we need to ban critical race theory from schools. But secondary to that, we need to do serious work to depoliticize our classrooms and focus again on giving our children in America the best education in the world. To give you a good example of what I'm talking about, in a place like Baltimore, they spend $17,500 per child on their education, okay? It's less than 10% of the high schoolers graduating in Baltimore public schools who are considered totally proficient in reading, math, and writing. Okay, that's unacceptable in America. That should be something that makes us all ashamed of the system that we have right now, and we need to fix it. So school choice is another big initiative that I support. I will be pushing that as hard as I can because I believe every child in America deserves to go to a school that fits their needs. The one-size-fits-all model of education doesn't work. Every child is not the same, and one size does not fit all. So we need to trust parents to choose what's right for their child. Nobody knows a child better than their parent does. So if a religious school is best for your child or in alignment with your values, the money that is earmarked for your child at public school should follow the child to that private school. Same thing with if public school is best for your child, the money should stay there and follow your child to that public school. If homeschooling or microschooling is best, the money should follow you there. And we will see a total transformation of education in America to really serve the needs of children. And that's what's so important, is serving the needs of the child. And our education system's not doing that anymore. So in my perfect world, yes, I will go after every issue that eliminates politicization in our classrooms. One way we can do that is the formation of a reporting tool for parents to be able to report educators or institutions, or any school rather, that has teachers or staff that are pushing critical race theory, pushing politicization or making anybody feel uncomfortable in the school environment about politics, because you shouldn't be afraid to go to school due to politics. You shouldn't know who your teachers vote for. That's not something that the education system was built for. When I was a kid, I never knew who my teachers voted for. My kids could tell you who every one of their teachers in California voted for, and some of their teachers here in Tennessee too. So if you live in Tennessee, you're not out of the woods here. We have issues here. A teacher had a Che Guevara poster in the classroom in Williamson County recently, okay? As a as a son of a Cuban refugee who literally had family that were assaulted by this regime and killed by Che and Castro. It's disgusting that anybody would have a picture of their murderer in a classroom, but yet they do, even here in Tennessee. So the private schools and public schools are not exempt. We have work to do here to eliminate this in total. And so if you go to a school that's private, I encourage you guys, we all know the problems at public school, but if your child goes to private school, look at what institution that school ties itself to. Every independent school has to have something that they're tied to for their accreditation. So in the case of a lot of them, it's an organization called NAIS. NAIS sort of is a conglomerate of a lot of private schools, and they push an ideology. In fact, they're pushing one right now that says that there should be no gender in school. From now on, you don't call students by female or male pronouns. You refer to them as students only, because they want to eliminate gender. Another tenet that they believe in is critical race theory. So they're pushing this all over. And guess what? A lot of our public schools here in Davidson County, Williamson County, Cheatham, they are a part of NAIS, and they were a part of this. So I know a school here in Williamson County sent teachers to what was called the People of Color Conference for NAIS last year, okay? And at that conference, they had a panel called White Boys Behaving Badly and No More White Tears. Both of these panels were explicitly racist. They were designed to target one race. This is the opposite of the direction we need to be going. We need to stop looking at the color of people's skin to judge them and start looking at the content of their character. The more we teach children to look at the content of the character of the child beside them instead of the skin color of the child beside them, the stronger our country is going to be.
Well, Robby, we wish you the best in your run for Congress. We definitely need common sense back in our nation. And actually, just to let you know, in the news this week, legislation here in Tennessee has already progressed, has advanced from one assembly to another, from one committee to another, in which they're addressing, or should I say, they prohibit the main tenets of critical race theory, such as the belief that America is fundamentally and systemically racist, that an individual can be inherently privileged, racist, sexist, or oppressed based on their race or sex. It passed the House, one of the committees in the House, 69-23. And I got news early this morning that it passed yet another committee today in Tennessee. So basically, we're seeing that Tennessee is being proactive in making sure that this kind of curriculum is not indoctrinating our children and fueling divide rather than promoting racial reconciliation. And before we go, and I want to thank again our powerhouse panel, Daniel Vargas. Yes.
Could I add something to that real quick? Because it's
Yes.
actually really important to the passing of that law. If you can, and you're watching this, please reach out to your local rep and ask them about putting forward an amendment for there to be a parental reporting tool. Because right now, the law is fantastic. The only thing missing is the parental reporting tool for a parent to be able to report the political indoctrination or critical race theory indoctrination from a teacher. Right now, it all falls to inside that to the education secretary being able to, be the sort of enforcement on it. And she can't be everywhere at once. So we need a reporting tool for parents and maybe a board of parents to be able to decide on whether or not something was a violation of the law.
Absolutely. We definitely have to protect parental rights. We can never let a school system trump parental rights. So thank you so much for including that. So please contact your representative. And if you're watching this webinar from another state, Please follow what's going on in the Tennessee House and Senate and if it makes it to the governor's desk, so that if this inspires legislation in your state so that we can secure our public school education and again bring healing to the divide, then do so and share this webinar with your legislators and say, hey, you gotta see this. And before we go, I want to close with a trailer to an award-winning documentary that involves our very own Reverend C.L. Bryant. So Reverend, we're gonna close with this trailer. Before we publish it here at the end of our webinar, is there anything you'd like to add or say regarding the documentary and the one you're probably working on right now?
It is a documentary that was ahead of its time. It's called Runaway Slave. Everybody is in it, from Dr. Thomas Sowell to my dear friend Andrew Breitbart. It is one that is produced and helped financed by my parent company, FreedomWorks, which is the largest grassroots organization in the nation. We boast nearly 6 million activists on the ground, just like you. Go to our Facebook page, FreedomWorks Facebook page, and join our nearly 5 million Facebook participants there. Download my show, the free app, C.L. Bryant Show. This video is one that, as I said, is ahead of its time. It does, in fact, deal, and you'll see in this short clip, with the issues that we're dealing with today, even though it was made nearly 9 years ago. The next film will be called Red, White, and Black, and I look forward to having that out before the election of 2022. And every one of you that's been on this panel, I must say that it is my esteemed honor to have shared this platform with you. Nilsa, thank you so much for the invitation. Dr. Wang, just absolutely mesmerized by your message. Danny, thank you so much for being there. Miss Tennessee, thank you so much. Robby Starbuck, my producer, has asked for you specifically, and so we're going to get all of you on the show. Nilsa, I believe you'll be on tomorrow. Download that free. Red State Talk Radio, the largest talk platform in the country, is the one that I'm on 12 noon to 2 o'clock daily. God bless and keep you all. Here's the trailer. Take a look.
The United States of America is built on white supremacy and racism.
America is the freest country the human race has ever known.
This is a country that is divided, and we're going to have social unrest.
Wake up, America! Tell me why you're great! Who holds your liberty? Who holds your freedom? I'm C.L. Bryant, and I am a runaway slave.
We made a lot of progress, but we're not gonna let you turn back the clock.
What these people are race hustlers. That's how they derive their power, by making them believe that the white man has the foot on their neck.
White people have allowed themselves to be intimidated by the so-called civil rights leaders. If they disagree with black people, then they are racist.
This is the kind of stuff that causes trouble. You're digging in a wound that's trying to heal. The Tea Party is racist?
Yes. They are the enemy, man. They are the enemy.
We know how to sucker punch you, because we just begun to fight.
Somehow down racial lines, we're still divided. The question has to be why?
With all the rumbling that's going on in our nation right now, I've got to find out if there's other people in this country that feel the same way that I do.
We got a new Underground Railroad 2.0. We kind of like the Harriet Tubmans of our day now.
My guest in the studio, C.L. Bryant, the runaway slave.
Guess what? We become the troublemakers.
They say we're not really black. How can you be black and be conservative?
If you don't have the right label, then we want to excommunicate you from the community.
What broke down in Black America is just a picture of what's breaking down in the rest of society.
The slippery slope of leftist progressivism that is taking place in America today.
What the liberal Democrats have in mind is to have the government become our God through entitlement programs that shackles people to a system of being dependent.
Statism, government in our homes telling us what to do, when, where, and how.
Playing the race card, playing the class warfare card. They want people to stay on that Democrat plantation mindlessly.
Not only has big government enslaved America's poor, but now we're looking at the extension of government into all communities.
Will the wounds of the past be our undoing, or will they heal? When time runs out, where will you be? What did you do with the time given?